is listening, guys. Welcome to another edition of an instant reaction for the NBA Finals. My name's Grayson Mann, and this is the Man with the Plan podcast. Boston Celtics are one win away from being NBA champions. They escaped Dallas in a furious comeback from the Mavericks, 106 to 99. There's so much to get into it, but first, let me start by saying I apologize for the weird setup on our YouTube audience. I'm back home in Somerville after a very strange super regional in Clemson, covering for Clemson TigerNet. And man, wow, that's a crazy podcast episode in the waiting for its own. And we have a big guest coming very soon. So I am very, very excited about the future of that. So stay tuned. I made an announcement on Twitter. I can't say anything yet, but I'm very, very excited about the prospect of that. So let's get into it. Boston is one win away from winning the NBA Finals, 106-99. And I think there's so many angles that you could take this, but let's start at the end and talk about Jaylen Brown here for a couple minutes. So there's always going to be this weird game with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum within the media. Who's better? Do they can they coexist together? It started in 2021 when they were, I think, 17 and 18 under Ime Udoka. They were struggling, and it felt like they couldn't coexist, or that was at least the narrative. They buckled down and head to the NBA Finals that year, and they've been a pretty dominant bunch ever since, minus the one championship. And now they're one game away from really that big monkey on their back. The big criticism of this duo is that they can't win a championship. And regardless of how they got there, they're a game and they're a step away from closing this out. And Jaylen Brown, for all of the attention he received negatively after game 7 in Miami of not being able to shoulder the weight of the Boston Celtics, squarely within the two shooting hands that he possesses. Jaylen Brown in the fourth and third quarter, he only had 6 points at halftime. Jason Tatum was taking over. We'll talk about him very shortly, but Brown explodes for 25 points. I believe he had 7 or 8 in the fourth quarter, a couple big shots when it felt like the Mavericks, the game was within their grasp. They were on a 27-2 run at one point. It was ridiculous, or 21-2 run at some point. It was ridiculous at how the Mavericks were furiously coming back. The Celtics, for as much as they are talented, sometimes you just have to hope they play stupid basketball. And it was coming out at full front in that stretch. The Celtics got their lead by sharing the basketball really well. The thing that I harped on in these first two instant reactions were Boston's ability to share the ball at a high clip. And I felt once again it was, I believe, 26 assists and 38 made shots. So they did it again, but there was a stretch there in the third and fourth quarter where Boston wasn't doing that. It was a lot of ISO ball. It was Jason Tatum taking contested shots. It was Peyton Pritchard taking contested shots. And when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, even Drew Holiday, who's noted as making the bigger shots and being the smarter player in those moments, it was Jaylen Brown making that step. And I think should Boston close this out in 4, I think Jaylen Brown will end up with Finals MVP. He's had all the big highlight plays. He's had all the big moments. I think Jason Tatum played a pretty solid game for his standards. I don't love his second half for the most part. So if I were to sort of summate this in the shortest way possible, Jason Tatum started it and Jaylen Brown finished it. And without Kristaps Porzingis, that was sort of what you expected them to do. They carried the weight. They combined for 61 of Boston's 106. And I think that's what you needed from the Jays. This is what that one game where you can point to in this series and go, yeah, that Boston may be built like a freight train, but that freight train at the front has some powerful rails at the beginning to really create a crevice for whatever it's going. I don't know where I was going with that analogy, but I hope you understand the point of this team is centered around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Both of them took their turn to have their moment. Jason Tatum got going in the first and second quarter. Let's just talk about him real quick. I thought he was much more decisive in this game than he was in games 1 and 2. He was hitting more three-point shots. I don't think he hit too many, but compared to how he was shooting in games 1 and 2, it certainly was a noticeable difference. He was getting to the rim more. I think for Tatum, when he's assertive early and he's starting to make shots, there's a rhythm that he sort of plays as a very rhythmic player. And he got into a rhythm. Dallas threw their best punch at Boston early, and you thought, okay, this is another desperation moment for Dallas. They're really going to throw the kitchen sink at Boston. And the Celtics first down 22-9, and that quarter 31-30, only down one. So they felt pretty good about it and really held serve till about the third quarter and really exploded in a 3-point barrage that you saw similarly in the first quarter of game or the first half of game one with Porzingis, Hauser, and there were just so many factors that Boston needed. And speaking of just 3 point from Hauser, same Hauser, I want to give him a little bit of some little flowers. He had 14 minutes tonight. He was 3 of 4, 9 points, best plus minus of plus 16. And I don't want to talk about his 3 point shooting. I think his defense on Luka in that stretch where Boston was either trying to hold on to a lead or keep this back and forth fist fight with Dallas. Because in the first half, it was seriously a 5, 6, 7 round boxing match, and they were going back and forth at each other. It really felt like the most competitive and highest intensity from both sides in this series. And man, I think you really had to come away with it entertained from that standpoint. And Hauser coming off the bench, I think a lot of people don't understand the defense that he can play. And he was playing at a high level. He had matchups on Kyrie Irving. He had matchups on Luka Doncic, who ended up fouling out tonight. That was a big moment down the stretch where Dallas was really finding all that momentum in a couple of Jaylen Brown instances where he decided to attack Doncic, and it ends up working in the Celtics' favor. Now to go to the Mavericks real quick. I said that this series is really dependent on how Kyrie Irving plays the rest of the way. And Kyrie Irving certainly stepped up to the plate with 35 points. He was electric tonight. It was his usual crafty playmaking self. He's been in these moments before. We've seen him hit big shots against Golden State and Steph Curry. He was a main catalyst alongside LeBron in that 2016 series. He's had plenty of finals experience, so I felt we all expected him to step up to the plate when the Mavericks needed it most. It just really shows you how I feel not undermanned Dallas maybe, but how Boston, when they're really clicking, when they're passing the ball at an electric level, when they're moving, they're sharing, they're playing smart. They're an unstoppable team in virtual every aspect, and we've seen that. They're 15-2 this postseason. They're 21-7 on the road in their last three postseason trips. That beats out the Michael Jordan-led Bulls in the 90s, and I think one of their three-peat stretches. Just to give you some context about how successful this team has been, and as they put it, the road dogs. They called it on the broadcast tonight. But moving forward, I'm still going to take Boston in five. I still think Dallas gets one desperation game. I think Luka and Kyrie, I have a feeling they'll let them play a tad bit more. There were a couple calls tonight that I wasn't hugely a fan of going against Dallas, and even that's from a Celtics perspective. But I thought Dallas played a really great game. They really rallied back. It reminded me of Game 3 in Indiana, where Indiana could not miss. And it was just Dallas in this case stepping in the shoes of the Celtics, going, okay, let's just ride the wave. Eventually, the shots will start to not be able to fall, and we'll just play our game. We'll let the game come to us, and our shots will come through. And you saw Josh Green make shots. You saw PJ Washington make shots. You saw Luka make shots. You saw Kyrie Irving make shots. It wasn't my turn, your turn. It was really great basketball there. And I thought we were a shot or two away from being, okay, this series is over, to Dallas might come back and win this thing. It's those pivotal games at home, going to a game four down 3-0 with a legitimate shot after a furious comeback, or down 2-1 after being down, I believe, 22 points late in the third quarter, and now having a legit shot to go tie this thing up and head back to Boston. So really, the pendulum was ready to swing in either direction, and Boston just came out on top thanks to some big plays of Jaylen Brown. And I think for Brown, you always know what you're going to get from him. 25, 20, 30 a night. He's a great slasher. He's very athletic. I think maybe the most athletic of the Celtics, and is just a little more assertive and sure of himself, I think, in the critical moments. And I think it'll probably come down to there going to be some criticism about Tatum's late game play once again, but I think this was his best game of his finals career. He was more decisive. He was more involved in the offense early. I think for Tatum, as much as I love about a superstar that's willing to sit back and sort of let the game come to him, I think he needs to be more assertive in these moments, especially without Kristaps Porzingis. I think they played a huge factor tonight. Dallas certainly was more assertive inside in the paint. Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, were able to make some phenomenal plays. The lob threat was open a lot more. Al Horford's a great defender in all respects, but Kristaps Porzingis' height is such a game changer in the length and the wingspan that he presents. It makes it a difficult matchup for any team to be able to defend when Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving dominate the headlines like they do and dominate so much attention and airspace within any head coach's mind. So to wrap it up, I think Boston probably closes this out, but I wouldn't be shocked if Dallas gets one in their home court. And the Celtics are one win away from the finals, so that means we have at least have one more. They're one win away from being champions, excuse me. So at least we have one more instant reaction to do here. I believe this may be the shortest of the three, but there's a lot going on this end. But I hope you guys enjoy the instant reaction as usual. We'll have a guest on for game 4 to break down the NBA Finals, whether it's Boston's NBA championship or Dallas extending this series to 3-1 and back to Boston on Monday. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in for another episode of this instant reaction series and an episode of the Man with the Plan podcast. Subscribe wherever it is that you're listening or watching. We really appreciate it. I appreciate it here on my end. Thank you so much for all the support this summer. Stay tuned and take care.